Drew. Hi. And obviously all my and might as well try and name people. What I'm going to talk about is biometrics. I'm going to give you an overview of the technologies. Hopefully, I can get into some of the more moral and legal issues involved, and some techniques which I have tried, which have worked. I've used these in a controlled environment. I must warn everyone: if you intend to use these in the production environment, you'll see this again in the presentation. Everything that I say is for informational purposes only. You do this, you get caught. It ain't my fault. I'm going to preface this. I'm going to say that I have some experience with some of these technologies. Some of the technologies I don't have direct access to, particularly ocular technologies. And I neglected to mention one kind of technology which I did use, and I found this pretty difficult to defeat. Let's get started. Quick objective to the talk, define what biometrics are, explain some of the operating theory behind each device, why they use them, why they choose these certain biometric, how it works, how unique it is, hopefully. And if once I see some tricks that I've done. Hopefully I'm going to talk about legal and ethical impact and security mechanism. That last one is not going to be up here, I'm going to just verbalize it. Let's go. First off, what are biometrics? The simplest, most concise definition is biometric is a sufficiently unique physical characteristic of a body which can verify that body's identity. Now, let's break this down a little bit. Two parts I want to break down. It's sufficiently unique. For instance, fingerprints. There's a 1 in a billion chance that someone has one fingerprint that matches yours. However, multiply that by a factor of 10, and you get 10 to the 90th, which is sufficiently impossible. Put that into seconds, that's what the universal level be. Get into bodily characteristic. This is something that a body has or does. My voice, for instance, is a pretty unique thing. It's horrible. Now, this biometrics is to differentiate from mnemonic access verification, username and password, for instance, and technological things, smart cards, key buttons, the ones you plug in that do the chips with the longest hell antennas. Now, let's get started. Biometrics. We are all used to biometrics. Everyone in this room processes biometrics. Because you see my face, next time you see this ugly visage at H2K2, you'll probably recognize it. This voice is also pretty hard to miss as well. You can recognize people by their face and their voice. You call someone up, they say hi if you don't have caller ID, and you recognize, generally speaking, who it is, or you recognize that you don't recognize them, in which case you usually give them a good old-fashioned click. Bodily marks have been used in the past. In Egypt, for instance, they would use bodily marks like these scars here. I am trying to make them visible. Can you see this? Okay, you can see these two long scars here. I got a scar on my thumb because a window looked at me funny. And this is a very unique thing, very painful to reproduce. So this would be a very good way in an ancient document to verify that I was a person that was involved in a transaction. Okay, now let's go to the technologies. There are only so many things that can be readily measured on a person in a professional environment because you generally speaking, don't want people to drop their drawers. Amongst the easier to verify, fingerprints, hand geometry, voice recognition, ocular scanning, signature analysis, and face recognition. Face recognition I didn't put in here because, like I said, I had to throw this together really bad. That's why it's just black text. It's on a white background. Next, this is my personal favorite because I feel that in terms of challenge recognition and uniqueness, this is pretty good. As far as current viable systems go, I prefer fingerprint scanning. Remember, you have 10 choices to choose from unless they're deformed. It's very good for challenge. You got 10 choices to choose from challenge response authentication, and challenge response is always a good option. The odds, like I said, they're 10 to the 90th to 1 that any two humans share the full set of fingerprints. You might get lucky with one, but in the challenge response system, one ain't going to cut it. The operating theory behind it. The swirls, whorls, etc. on a fingerprint are sufficiently unique. Most readers use CCD chips, just like the one in that camcorder that's sending this out over the World Wide Web. It takes an image of your fingerprint in 8-bit grayscale. I neglected to mention that newer systems utilize FBI compression technology, which, because of the size of the such fingerprints, if you take a full resolution 500 DPI, 8-bit grayscale scanning of each finger that racks up 10 megabytes per hand, per human. And when you consider that FBI has 20 million sets of fingerprints that they have to digitize, since they hate throwing things out as much as we do, they have to find a way to compress it. Their compression, because 2,000 terabytes of data is a lot to store in any system. The technology they use, very good fractal compression. Generally can get up to 26:1 compression, which saves a lot of space and makes this possible for you to store your fingerprint data on a smart card, as opposed to keeping it on a central server. Newer scanners are designed to require a live finger for access. They can detect pulse, and they use the infrared radiation emitting from your body as its light source. Remember, CCDs can do that. That's how night shot works, for those of you that like to look under people's clothes. Hand geometry. Hand geometry was successfully used at the 1996 Olympic Games to restrict access to the athletes and officials' quarters. When you put your hand on a flat surface, obviously parts of it will flatten out. You still have a recession in the middle of the hand. Hand geometry measures the hand itself, the width of the fingers, you name it. Though less apt for challenge response, and I personally think challenge response is a very good thing to have in these situations where you're attempting to secure something. It's still useful if you want to avoid the connotation of criminality associated with fingerprints. Because obviously the only time most people get fingerprinted is if they're in a police station being arrested for being a drunk stupid ass. Operant theory, again, no two hands are exactly the same. Even your own two hands, even though they're supposed to be mirror images of each other, generally speaking, the hand that you write with is going to be a little bit more fleshy than your other hand. The mirror images, which means that in and of themselves are different, and they're all also slight dips and depressions everything from, for instance, accidentally slicing through half of your finger with a Ginsu blade. Again, this is also CCDs based. It's a grayscale image. Now we're going to go into the next frame. Again, this is a technique that I tried in a controlled environment. I had access to fingerprint scanners and hand scanners that were slightly older, which means that these, again, like I said, newer scanners are designed to detect pulse and to take the light from the infrared light from the hand as its light source. So this technique will not work against newer scanners. That's why I'm practicing this particular one, and once I go into the other ones that I've tried and couldn't write down, I have to be explicit about this. Next, the trick that I used, I have paraffin wax. It has a low boiling point of approximately 130 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you have unless you're a real sucker for punishment, go with a different wax. Go with that wax. Sorry, if you go with a different wax, you'll be really killing yourself. And liquid latex is a good choice. Plaster can also be used to make accurate reproductions of fingers. However, they have the bad tendency that they don't flatten easily. Basically, you take the hand, you put it in the mold as follows. You put it flat, you need the back of the hand free, because if you make it full, if you dip the entire hand in, generally speaking, you will have a good deal of distortion when you pull the hand out. Dip it in the wax several times, makes a good mold. 5 times I found is an effective number. You take liquid latex, pour it in, allow it to harden. Again, if you were to try this in a production environment, this would not work with surveillance. Most of these techniques, you need something explicit and very loud in terms of visual. If you have a sufficient manned security and remote security at the location, as any good security installation should, this won't work. Generally speaking, if you get the novelty liquid latex, it's the wrong color anyway. All right, these are the scan rates that I attempted with this system. I have a system that I keep at home for these things. It never goes on a network, so don't bother trying to access it. I tried multiple access attempts. I tried approximately 100 access attempts. Without challenge fail, there was approximately a 25% fail rate, which means I could get in 75% of the time. With challenge response, assuming there was the correct hand, I received about a 35% fail rate. Hand geometry had a much lower success rate. Again, with wax, it's very easy to distort the image. You distort it, even when you pull it out, no matter how careful you are, there's more likely than not going to be some minor distortion. Let's go on to the next. Ocular scans. That's eye scans for those of you that don't speak English so well. These break down into retinal scans, the back of the eye, iris scans, the front of the eye. Retinal scans are more accurate, but they're harder to get. Consider, things think about the logistics of it. You have to shine a light in the back of the eye, which is fairly uncomfortable. It reads the pattern of blood vessels in the back, and because that comes out chaotically, it's good and random for you. Again, like I said, I mean, it takes a relatively long period of time if somebody has a hard time with the light. Iris scans are becoming more popular. In fact, in the Netherlands, are being used for immigration purposes. Despite what the medical books have believed, iris is imperfect. There are small bubbles, small nicks, cracks in there if you take a good look at it. Iris scanning recognizes them, and it'll take a look at it. It's done through CCDs. Most of this stuff is anything that requires any sort of optical trick will use a CCD. Newer scanners can work with people of various sizes. This is important because in older models of iris scanners, you have to have a light source to keep the iris, the pupil a constant size, so that the iris was the correct width for it to operate. Voice recognition. Like I said, my voice is pretty vile. It can become more vile if I need it to be. And it's pretty bad. But you can recognize people by voice quickly. But that's something computers are now being able to do. Again, you mix one microphone, a speaker, a couple wires, and a very remote computer, which makes it difficult to, because with a lot of the other technologies, generally speaking, the computer that does the actual processes has to be relatively close to the unit. Voice recognition does not, which means if you're trying to secure a building, this is a pretty good way to go. With human surveillance, if you have, again, this is from last year at H2K. We had Robert Steele, an ex-CIA spook, and he said that the only way to secure a building is if you have two people monitoring it, one of them off-site. If you have such a situation, first off, social engineering your way in becomes damn hard. Now, I had access to newer software, and I tried a sound. I have access in my home. There's a good region of it, which is a very acoustically silent room. It's very good for acoustics. I used a DAT, recorded several voice samples from different individuals who I had enrolled in this system, and I attempted to play it back for logging. I had a very high fail rate. A lot of systems will be able to sort out tape versus human. It's very difficult to do unless you have an acoustically silent room and a very good audio device. That isn't going to work. And again, like I said, that will fail if humans are surveilling. Next, it was in ideal conditions. It was where I was located. I had a quiet area where my systems are. The only noise is for all intents and purposes, and the occasional hiss pop and electrical fire. Okay. Now, signature capture is one of the newer tricks. Guys like me who have rotten arms and can't sign a sig well, it doesn't work with. A lot of people though can make their sigs reliably consistent. We can do that. It works. However, forgers, any good forger would be able to do their magic with a digital slate, with a pen attached to a slate, as would on paper. Now, why biometrics suck? Biometrics are intended to positively identify a person. But the idea is that if the system can identify you, then if it has 100% accuracy, or at least sufficiently close to 100%, where it's considered by the pointy-haired people in politics that it's 100% accuracy, then biometrics would be used as an identification scheme. If biometrics are adopted as an identification scheme, well, game over. Privacy dies, because chances are, such identification will be required at a lot of places. To access your bank accounts. Why wouldn't they use it? The infrastructure is there to track one's movements. It's a very dangerous technology. I highly disagree with the use of biometrics by governments, except to secure their high security buildings. There should be no incorporation of biometric technologies in everyday life. Because whatever can be abused will be abused if it's incorporated in one way. then it's a very short distance to get from there to an Orwellian state. That's all the slides I made. I'm going to try and field some questions. Some of it I might not be able to answer. I'll acknowledge that right away because I haven't had any much experience.
So,
I'll just hold the point.
Don't do that.
All right.
so
The question was, he has heard that there are some fingerprint scanners that depend on the resistance of the skin as opposed to a CCD. That's news to me since the resistance of skin is dependent on a lot of factors.
I can answer that. There are sensors out there made by Fujitsu and Siemens. These are solid state sensors. You have a matrix of about 400 by 400 pixels that are being read out electronically. And the image that you're getting out of that is precisely the same that you get out of a CCD image, but it's less prone to scratching and all that kind of stuff, and it can be built very much smaller and consumes very much less power. These sensors can also be faked. The only thing that you need is a quite good lattice emulsion that you can bring with carbon particles to the same resistance as skin has. So we have to feed these things through it. It's not really a problem. But what I wanted to ask was, we are not addressing the problem that most of these unique identifiers are being used in everyday life. If I want to get your fingerprints, it's very easy. I just give you a glass. You have all your five fingerprints of your hand. And we have already done index fingerprints from glasses used against fingerprint scanners by just using the usual stuff that the criminal investigation people uses. They have got all the stuff for getting fingerprints from glasses, and getting these things into images that are being recognized by CCD-based scanners is quite easy. And for a thing with the live detection, that's also not really difficult. Just putting in an infrared LED that has the right power level is just a day of experimentation to get the right level. So all these things.
Now, how would you just have to pulse in such a system?
Yeah, pulsing an LED. How simple is that? Huh? Just getting in some electronics, pulsing it with 8 beats per minute, 80 beats per minute, and there you are. That's not really difficult. Same with fingerprint scanners is there are not high security because you are giving away your fingerprints every day 100 times. And if I want to attack you, I get your fingerprints in no way flat, no problem. So, and one thing I wanted to ask for the voice recognition thing, did you try to high quality audio recorder that is analog? Because most of the more advanced voice recognition systems try to detect sample artifacts from data and other sources, and that's quite easy to do if you have the sound speed.
Okay. I used that because I had that at my disposal. It's the highest end audio device that I had.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. There are a lot of analog artifacts, but I mean, with the environment that I had, the only flaws would be in the tape. I had a decent set of speakers that had good acoustical.
Yeah, that doesn't matter as long as if you're playing.
Right.
If you're playing back from digital device, you have sample artifacts. And if you're measuring the sound quite good, you can see the sample artifacts in the analog output of that recorder. And that's the easy way to identify a recording from an actual human voice. So I played around with simple voice recognition systems that are being used for PCs, and most of these could be defeated by a high quality analog system.
Right. Okay.
Read the last slide. We replaced the word biometrics with perfect identification by smart cards. I get exactly the same point. So I don't see why biometrics are. If there is one system.
Well, but the difference with the smart card and biometric is that biometrics don't require.
Okay, any system that can perfectly identify.
I agree with you there. I mean I agree with you there. It's any perfect identification system is an evil in and of itself. You.
I'd like to ask if you could tell something about biometrics identification to 2D images, for instance, frames from video.
Face scanning. I knew I forgot to cover something. All right. Bone structure is a bit different, but face scanning relies on the simple fact that I mean, no matter what kind of a disguise you might wear, the basic elements of your face don't change. This is in use, for instance, in Las Vegas. Casinos that want to spot cheats, known blackjack cheats, or casinos that wish to see if individuals which they have banned for life have entered could and do have systems in place. These are human-operated systems. These aren't automatic, the ones that are used in Vegas. They basically measure the distance between the pupils, nose, distance between the eyes, and they come up with a list of individuals. This cuts through disguises because, again, no matter what kind of disguise you wear, as long as the elements of your face remain intact, then, I mean, you can't hide that.
Rumor had that in the UK, they wanted to automate systems such as this by linking it to cameras that are installed.
I know. I have no doubt that automation is possible. And that's a big problem because as far as I've seen, there's still a decently high false rate. Especially with a remote camera, since I don't know the UK system, I decided not to visit the UK, or Airstrip 1 as it's affectionately to be called. And I don't know much about their system that they have in place. But again, I mean, you're right. I mean, it can be automated, and then you get into more trouble because assuming that it falsely recognizes, because these instances aren't as unique as they could be, which is why in the Vegas system, what they are humans that operate it, and they have a list of potentials that they reference on. And these are full color images that they're using in Vegas too. So I mean, automation, so that you can get an idea of how different it is. Even with full color systems, there's a good possibility of false acceptance. Up and back. That's you.
Can I ask you a couple of questions about slide 14?
Slide 14. Again, I threw this together fairly quickly because my laptop conked out on me, so forgive me if I. Okay.
Do you happen to know what the false accept and false reject rates are in the normal environment of this whole?
Per se, there are no real standards in place. I mean, anytime you try and get a good, solid answer, the only place that has any sort of numbers that's really publicly accessible are manufacturer websites, and of course they skew it.
My experience is that the equipment comes with some instrumentation that you can dial up the accept and reject rate that you want, essentially.
Well, if you the accept rate and fail rate can be modified by the number of unique features, for instance, in a fingerprint that is scanned.
Do you know how many unique features are being recorded? You said that you can keep this information on a smart card. Now, I know that what they store on the card is, thousands of bytes, but I'm assuming that there's really only a few features. I'm wondering about the search space that you would use if you wanted to attack a system, if there were an autonomous system, and you wanted to do some sort of guessing attack against it. How would you search that space? How big is it?
Well, I'm trying to get in my brain the idea of doing a guess attack against the fingerprint scanner.
Well, just imagine, for example, they only took 4 features off the.
That's way too low.
Obviously, because the search space is too small. I mean, it wouldn't surprise us.
The police has
I think
certified.
involved with the manufacturer of fingerprint recognition hardware. Presentation very soon on Friday. Basically, most of the fingerprint recognition devices, at least on the market, use at least a 400 dpi scanner.
Yes.
They end up spitting out a 400 to 500 byte image, and on an average of 30 to 40 unique
Yeah,
pieces.
but, okay, so that's really the question, is how many of these features, crossing points and swirls and whatever, we never say this publicly.
The minutia is generally in the industry derived from 30 to 40 unique characteristics.
Can you determine by reverse engineering their software exactly how many minutia they're using and what the nature of it is?
They're telling you that. Normally they're telling you how many minutiae is required.
Normally they're not. And this is my experience. When I ask them, they just.
They do try and keep their algorithms, as quiet as possible, so
Yeah.
that you can reverse engineer it to the point of a replay attack.
There must be some that are patented. Can I ask you a couple more questions?
I'll
When you
try
talk
and
about
answer
the
them.
challenge response mechanism being used here, I just didn't understand. What do you mean by a challenge response environment?
I mean. The scanner, on top of the scanner, because I believe in multi-factor. If you're going to do this sort of thing, it has to be part of multi-factor. You can't have this isolated. You stick in you either type in your user pass, you insert your hardware access device, and it'll say verification. Put this finger on the scanner.
Okay, so it's a number from 1 to 10.
So essentially, or of course, if they wanted to be more user-friendly, laugh now. They could just as easily say left pinky, right forefinger.
Okay, I understand. Thank you very much. There's one more comment I want to make. There was a paper last year at a smart card conference called CARDIS 2000, C-A-R-D-I-S. Go to the web to be able to find it. The Springer Notes proceedings. There was a guy at that conference who had done some similar work similar to your own. He was using a photoresist technique so that he didn't have to use the hot wax and stuff like that. And he described in very fine detail exactly how to do this, both in the case where you have the assistance of the party whose fingerprint you're trying to manufacture, and when you don't, which is much more difficult, but can be social engineered in certain ways. And what he ended up with, I gather that you end up with something that is like a thick piece of latex.
Essentially, yeah.
And he ends up with a very thin strip of latex that you can actually stick over your own thumb.
In which case, that would be good.
Pulse works and heat works, and if you use a little bit of conductive material on it, galvanic
resistance, right?
Resistance also works. So, and it's a very practical technique. So
You're very right.
that's CARDIS 2000.
Part of it is that okay. Part of it is that I was somewhat limited in terms of the time factor, in terms of the things I had on hand. I don't have.
Well, no,
so much
yeah,
on
that's
hand.
the point, is that you can do this with
Right.
materials in your own home just as you done. He got his stuff mostly from dental hygiene shops.
Well done.
So you can do it even with very thin cigarette paper. You fool some sensors by just making imprint and wax, and then they're taking very thin cigarette paper and doing this pencil, rubbing through, and using simply the cigarette paper over my own thumb, and it works. So these sensors, the cheap sensors are so shitty, you wouldn't believe that.
All right.
Is there any evidence of racial bias in biometrics? Is that not
I'm trying to understand the nature of the question. You're saying is there racial bias in biometrics?
for instance, can people figure out an algorithm to take out black people or take out Jewish people?
First off, fingerprint scanners, fancy geometry scanners generally are grayscale. Because if you were making color, the file size would be virtually unmanageable, especially in a large system. So, if you're trying to ask if there are any racial features which follow with that sort of thing, the answer is hell no. If you're talking about face scanning, then if someone wished to, they probably could. But I'm trying to think of my what was. Insomnia in action, people. You could possibly, but what did you do? Most of the time, face scanning isn't done very actively. Most of the cases that have been really publicized have been, for instance, this theoretical in the UK, what's been happening in Tampa, Florida, what happened at the Super Bowl, for instance, where it was automatic. I'm not sure how one would preclude access on a racial basis. If you're trying to talk about police profiling and some things like that, that's entirely possible. But on the flip side of profiling, for instance, where I live in Chicago. Okay, now for those of you that want to try and figure out where I am in Chicago, don't bother. It's a big city. In Chicago, for instance, there are areas that are higher crime areas, and they happen to be the areas with those of African descent. So, profiling and sometimes in terms of crime profiling, that sort of thing. But with most of these technologies that utilize they don't, except for face scanning, pretty much. Iris scans, retina scans, hand geometry, signature, fingerprints, and to an extent voice. Because it depends, of course, on the kind of accentation they have in their voice. But you really couldn't use this as a way to single out people of certain races, with the exception of facial profile, facial scanning. All right.
Do you know of any automated system currently in use anywhere in the world that uses public cameras and automated face recognition.
That's in Newcastle.
Casinos in Ontario, Canada, they do that for cheap recognition. You mentioned in Vegas as well.
Yeah, in Vegas, the system I saw was operated by humans.
It's pretty automated.
There's this one town in Britain where they have about 45 cameras. They're using this automatic face recognition.
Yet another reason not to visit Airstrip 1.
And there was that incident at the Super Bowl where they tried to face it on the security cameras in the stadium and identified some little criminals there. So they're trying to do something. Has anybody played here with face recognition software for these public surveillance purposes? What I really would be interested in is how such a system reacts if you're getting positives from the database, like people that are in the database, getting their photo, putting it into a piece of paper and placarding the whole city with them. So, I would be really interested to see how the system would react.
Yeah. Well, again, I mean, humans are much better at face recognition than computers are right now. What computers can do is do my mouse. I mean, they did this at the Super Bowl last year, where every face in the stadium was scanned. I still think, I'm of the opinion that these and any other perfect recognition technologies are a great evil to be avoided at all costs, because I happen to like my privacy.
Yeah, but the only thing that we can do about it is, besides political thing, is sabotage, and that's what we actually need to think about.
Right.
How to sabotage public surveillance systems.
Right.
And also to raise public awareness, because what I see around me, cameras popping up everywhere in Amsterdam where I live too. I mean, in a couple of years they're going to say, hey, it works in England, so why don't we use it here as well? And yeah, sure, we're going to pick only the high-profile criminals and
Well,
the guys
that's
who...
the argument they used in Tampa, and they had a very large public backlash.
Well, I hope that happens.
Yeah, but if you
I hope the general population
If
is
you look
smart
at the technology, there's one thing. At the beginning of this year, the price of electronic video recording for surveillance cameras dropped below the thing of conventional long-time video recorders. So that means every system that is being installed today is not being installed with the long-term video recorders, but with hard disk recording systems. This is simply a PC. And the last time I asked the vendor for an offer for such a system, we explicitly said, okay, and we have 2 PCI slots free. End of the year, we give you the face recognition PC card for that. So just plug it in and there you go. So that means the technology is being deployed right now.
Right.
So hash values and transmission over the internet and analysis is all possible within a couple of years. It will be done.
Well, still, Matt, again, I mean, well, it's pretty hard for someone going on a space like this to look like a piece of Dozen females go on both. I know. I mean, by where I live is a large number.
And we occasionally get laws, temporary laws that make helmets and masks.
I missed what you just said. I have a little bit of difficulty hearing. You repeat what you just said.
In Amsterdam, we sometimes get temporary laws, regulations for a month or so, you know, was it G8 or something that makes masks, helmets, and other stuff that classified as well.
Lovely. Yeah, but still, it shouldn't be.
Well, these laws are made before the event is there. So there was no excuse.
Some of those laws are retracted after the event.
Well, regulations tend to vary.
Yeah, so in Germany, wearing a face mask on demonstration is called passive armament.
Passive armament. Okay. That's no passive armament to me sounds like something a martial artist would possess, a high-level martial artist. Okay, somebody comes at you with a billy club, you know how to properly defend yourself and punish the attacker. That sounds like passive armament to me. Wearing a mask is considered passive armament? Well, if you're defending yourself, that's one. But I mean, I think that would be really passive armament because I mean your body's going.
not sure if it's helmet curling up. I'm not sure if it's helmets rather than masks that I call custom. I think masks. But it's guys. But that's illegal at demos too. So custom.
So aren't we
Brave New World
aren't we
with such
fighting
wonders
this on
in
the
it.
wrong level?
Maybe dystopias of gathered.
Wear false nose and stuff. Okay. That's cheap to people's part.
Yeah, but aren't we fighting this at the wrong level? Because they'll just make those kind of countermeasures, any technical countermeasures, they'll make illegal. They'll label you a terrorist, put you in jail. By
No, because when you make new declarations and laws to make those things illegal, it increases public awareness inadvertently.
Well,
Well, it depends on the public's awareness of
they
the law as
passed
it
a
is.
lot of laws recently that the general
Consider
population.
12 USC 1201. Most people weren't aware of that.
Laws are very rarely posted on.
Right.
And besides,
They're not posted in billboards, they're buried in journals.
people,
Played the right way with the media. I mean, again, the UK situation, perhaps like that, really what the legal situation is. And I know certainly there were regulations for a couple of demonstrations recently. In the UK, they do use a lot of surveillance cameras in demonstration situations, and these do have the authority to ask you to take off a mask, and if you refuse, then I forgot what the legal term is, but
Beat the living hell out of you?
So the media know about these laws, people know about the law, but the media are putting them across as protecting us against these evil people. So,
God.
you know what I mean? It's sort of like if you wear a mask, you are doing something evil, therefore, if you are a good person, then you will agree with this law. So,
No offense to anybody that sympathizes with these people, but I think the IRA and the Islamic militants really ruined it for us by creating this terrorist thing. I mean, terrorism plays perfectly for television. It's brief,
No, we
it's
have to play
emotional,
smarter.
everything. But because of that, we have this new word.
What are some of the suggestions? Because I hear a lot of pointing out what the problem is, and I haven't heard very much of a suggestion of any kind
okay,
of action.
first of all,
In which active terms? I mean,
okay, first of all, you have to make the picture clear to the general population. I mean, putting cameras everywhere on the street, sure, that's gonna raise some eyebrows. But if you have on the political side, like they're doing now, the talk that, yeah, we're protecting you and we're protecting you from evil terrorists that will attack your computer and destroy all your email of last year, then people will have an incentive to say, sure, cops, harass people who wear masks, do all this. But if you can document that the police is actually right now and in the past already abusing the powers that they have been given, then you're fighting I think to fight on the political level and maybe get something done.
But the general problem that we have is that at this moment, the majority of European politicians is trying to sell personal security as a higher value than personal freedom. That's the basic point.
And those who trade freedom for security deserve neither.
Freedom isn't perceived as an value anymore. That is something worth. Security and safety are a much higher worth in the public opinion. And that's the basic paradigm that we need to address. So, and saying, okay, if you're a grown-up guy, then you should care more for your freedom than you for your safety, for your security. And yeah.
Thank everybody for coming in. We got the next session that probably needs to get set up, assuming that they're better with their clocks than I am. Thanks for coming by.